Imagine a scenario where the most advanced, I guess, trillion-dollar technological leap in human history.
The whole AI boom, right?
Exactly, the artificial intelligence boom happening right now. Imagine it being heavily dependent on this tiny stretch of water, barely 21 miles wide, halfway across the globe, and currently surrounded by warships.
It honestly sounds like the plot of a geopolitical thriller or something.
It really does.
Yeah.
But it's actually the exact reality of the global economy today. Today being Wednesday, June 24, 2026. So welcome to today's deep dive. We know you're here because, well, the world is moving incredibly fast, and you want to get quickly and thoroughly informed about these massive shifts happening all around us.
Yeah, and it's a staggering paradox when you really look at it because, the digital ether of cloud computing and AI, it's all entirely tethered to the physical world.
Right.
To shipping lanes, to raw materials, and to these highly, highly fragile diplomatic agreements.
And we have a stack of sources today that maps out that entire tangled web. We're pulling from a really comprehensive Wikipedia timeline of the 2025 to 2026 U.S.-Iran negotiations, plus a Guardian article detailing the return of UN nuclear inspectors to Iran.
Which is huge.
Massive. We've also got a PR Newswire release about a huge structural shakeup in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and an IG market preview for Micron's third quarter earnings, which actually dropped today.
And, on the surface, those sound like four completely different subjects. But our mission today is to extract the most important nuggets from these sources.
Right, to connect the dots.
Exactly. To show you the direct mechanical through line connecting this unprecedented Middle East peace framework to the tech-driven supercycle transforming the U.S. stock market right now.
Okay, let's unpack this, because global stability and tech valuations are basically interlocking gears in the exact same machine. But before we get into the weeds on the military strikes, the negotiations, the rhetoric from the U.S., Israel, and Iran, I really need to be incredibly clear with you, the listener, right up front.
Yeah, the disclaimer is important here.
It really is. Our sources cover highly politically charged, volatile, and quite frankly, devastating events. We are not taking sides here. We are not endorsing the viewpoints of any of the original sources or the politicians or the nations involved.
Right.
Our job is simply to report the factual sequence of events impartially, so you can understand the landscape.
Because to understand the economic and technological shifts happening today, we kind of have to look at the geopolitical realities strictly as, a series of data points and physical constraints.
Yeah, so let's start with the most critical data point. The U.S.-Iran Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding, which was just signed remotely on June 17th. The timeline to get to this signature it's a 14-month roller coaster.
It really is.
It kicked off back in March 2025. When President Donald Trump sent a letter to Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, and he was demanding a new nuclear deal and set this really strict 60-day deadline. Why issue a 60-day clock? What's the strategy there?
Well, it's a classic pressure tactic, right? It's designed to force a binary choice and basically bypass the prolonged diplomatic stall tactics that usually define these kinds of negotiations.
Force their hand.
Exactly. The logic is to create immediate urgency, but the mechanism of a hard deadline is super dangerous because if it passes without an agreement, you are forced to escalate or you lose all your credibility.
And they definitely escalated. The deadline passed. There was this intense diplomatic silence. And that breakdown led directly to the 12-day war, which, as we know, eventually spiraled into the broader 2026 Iran war.
Right, and we saw massive, just unprecedented military strikes from the U.S. and Israel targeting Iranian nuclear facilities.
Yeah, military infrastructure too,
Yeah, and the casualties, the shifting power dynamics, they were immense. By February 2026, those strikes resulted in the assassinations of top Iranian officials, including the supreme leader himself, Ali Khamenei, and Ali Larijani, who was, a really central figure in the negotiations up to that point. So suddenly you're dealing with a massive power vacuum in Tehran.
Which completely changes the calculus of who is even authorized to make a deal, right?
Precisely.
Which honestly makes the logistics of the ongoing negotiations almost impossible to comprehend.
Yeah.
I mean, you have active bombings, leadership decapitations, and yet these back-channel talks were somehow still happening.
Yeah, in Oman, in Geneva, and then eventually in Islamabad.
Right. So how do diplomats physically negotiate a ceasefire when their nations are actively bombing each other?
It relies entirely on intermediaries. You use trusted third-party nations, so often the Swiss or the Omanis, who maintain open, secure communication lines with both sides.
So they're not even in the same room.
No, The diplomats never sit in the same room. The intermediary physically shuttles messages back and forth, or they use secure links to negotiate the terms. It ensures that the dialogue doesn't completely collapse, even when the physical infrastructure around them is literally being targeted.
Yeah.
It's a grueling, incredibly indirect process, fueled by the sheer necessity of preventing just a total regional collapse.
It's kind of like, it makes me think of a high-stakes geological fault line. Pressure builds for 14 months of indirect talks. It releases in these devastating earthquakes like the strikes and the wars, and then eventually settles into this fragile new landscape.
That's a really good way to look at it.
And that dynamic is perfectly illustrated by the remote signing ceremony on June 17. You have Trump signing this document while having dinner with the French president at the Palace of Versailles.
Right.
And then you have the newly elevated Iranian president, Masoud Pezeshkian, signing it remotely in Tehran. It's the culmination of immense geopolitical pressure finding a temporary fragile release valve.
But, understanding how we got to this MOU is one thing. If we want to understand what this means for global trade and global stability, we have to look at the exact mechanical terms they hammered out.
Right, during that final 18-hour diplomatic marathon in Switzerland.
Yeah, led by U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araki.
So the core of the MOU is a 60-day ceasefire. And the most immediate physical impact of this is the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. The agreement states it has to be reopened toll-free for 60 days.
And according to The Guardian, it's actually already functioning.
Yeah. Qatari liquefied natural gas tankers and Iraqi crude supertankers are physically moving through the strait right now.
Which is a massive relief for global markets.
Yeah.
And in exchange for allowing that maritime freedom, Iran made a massive concession of their own.
The inspectors.
Exactly. They agreed to allow the IAEA, the UN's nuclear inspectors, back into the country to monitor their nuclear program.
Which is the cornerstone for the international community.
Yeah.
I mean, without independent physical monitoring, there's just no way to verify Tehran's claims that their nuclear program remains strictly for energy purposes.
Right. But the real engine of this deal, the thing making it actually work, is the economic leverage. The U.S. Treasury is issuing a 60-day waiver to lift sanctions on Iran's oil and petrochemical exports.
And on top of that, they're unfreezing an estimated $24 billion in Iranian assets, routing them through Qatar.
Yeah, and we really need to explain how those secondary sanctions and frozen assets actually work. Because it's not just about the U.S. refusing to trade with Iran.
Oh, right. Secondary sanctions are wild.
Yeah. Secondary sanctions mean the U.S. tells the rest of the world, like China or India, that if they buy Iranian oil, they will be cut off from the U.S. dollar and the entire American financial system.
It's a global chokehold.
It really is. So lifting that waiver essentially gives the rest of the world permission to buy Iranian oil without facing American retaliation.
Okay, and regarding that $24 billion, Qatar doesn't just, hand over pallets of cash to Tehran, right?
No, not at all. Qatar acts as a highly monitored international escrow agent. So the funds are held in Qatari banks, and Iran can draw on them to pay approved third-party vendors for things like food, medicine, or domestic infrastructure. It ensures the capital provides a pressure release valve for Iran's runaway inflation, but without being diverted to military operations.
The framework seems meticulously constructed on the economic side, but looking at the geopolitical side, there is a massive structural flaw here.
The Lebanon Clause.
Yes. The MOU includes a deconfliction mechanism for Lebanon. The goal is a ceasefire there. But Israel and Hezbollah, the two primary actors, actually engaged in combat in Lebanon. They were not at the table in Switzerland.
Yep.
And Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu flat out refused to be bound by the Lebanon Clause, stating Israeli forces will just stay in southern Lebanon.
Which is a huge sticking point.
Right. So if they are signing a 60-day framework that relies on regional de-escalation, but Israel, a primary actor, outright rejects the Lebanon Clause, aren't they just putting a 60-day Band-Aid on a bullet wound?
I mean, that is the exact vulnerability international analysts are pointing out. The agreement relies heavily on intentional diplomatic ambiguity. It is a 60-day framework, right? It's not a permanent treaty. By leaving the most contentious, systemic issues unresolved, both sides can basically claim a political victory at home without making impossible concessions. It's a temporary pause button on a machine that is still plugged in.
And the rhetoric surrounding that pause button is incredibly volatile. I mean, just days before the signing, Trump posted explosive threats on social media, telling the Iranian negotiators, you won't even make it back to your fin country if they close the strait again.
Yeah, and Vice President Vance defended the post in a press conference. He called it a strategic response to Iranian, quote, trash talk. It just proves how volatile the diplomacy
It
remains.
does. It really highlights the brinkmanship.
But if you zoom out from the rhetoric for a moment and just look at the immediate mechanical outcome, the Strait of Hormuz is open, energy is moving, the threat of a broader immediate supply chain collapse has been averted for the next 60 days.
Right. And the moment the macroeconomic panic subsides, Wall Street immediately pivots its attention back to the only thing it actually wants to talk about right now.
The artificial intelligence supercycle.
Exactly. Which takes us from the geopolitical chessboard in the Middle East straight into the heart of the U.S. economy. Because on June 29, just a few days from now, a monumental structural shift is happening.
This is huge news.
It is. Alphabet, the parent company of Google, is officially joining the Dow Jones Industrial Average, replacing Verizon.
And, to understand why swapping one tech-adjacent company for another is such a monumental event, you have to understand the underlying mechanics of the Dow Jones.
Yeah, it's not like the S&P 500, right?
Exactly. The S&P 500 is weighted by market capitalization, meaning the total overall value of the company dictates its influence. But the Dow Jones is a price-weighted index. It consists of just 30 companies, and their influence is determined strictly by the price of a single share of their stock.
Wait, really? So if Company A's stock is trading at $100 a share and Company B is trading at $50 a share, Company A has twice as much influence on the Dow's daily movements, even if Company B is like a fundamentally larger business overall.
That is the exact mathematical quirk of the Dow.
That's crazy.
It is, and it's the sole reason Verizon is being removed. Verizon's share price has been persistently low, which meant it only carried about a 0.5% weight in the entire index.
So it's basically immaterial.
Exactly. Mathematically, it was a ghost. It wasn't actually moving the needle.
So by bringing Alphabet in, the Dow is absorbing a massive footprint of modern technology. We're talking about exposure to digital advertising, massive cloud infrastructure, artificial intelligence, hardware, and autonomous mobility.
It completely rebalances what the market actually considers industrial in the modern age.
I like to think of the Dow Jones as like the ultra-exclusive VIP club of American industry. Swapping out a traditional telecom giant for a search and AI behemoth proves that data, cloud infrastructure, and AI are the new industrial commodities of our era.
Absolutely. Incidentally, the PR Newswire source notes that Honeywell International is spinning off its aerospace division, but the parent company operating as Honeywell Technologies, Inc. will actually remain in the Dow.
Ah, okay. So the focus is clearly shifting away from, physical cables and aerospace toward digital infrastructure.
But the mechanical ripple effect of this swap is what truly matters to the market. Because when Alphabet is added, index providers have to recalculate something called the Dow's divisor.
Right. Break that down first. What is the divisor mechanically?
Well, imagine the Dow as a scale balancing 30 different weights. If you take off a small weight Verizon and drop a massive weight like Alphabet onto the scale, the total value of the index would artificially spike overnight.
Even though the actual economy hasn't changed at all.
Right. To prevent that, they use a mathematical denominator, the divisor. They shrink or expand this underlying number to ensure that at the exact moment the market opens on June 29, the overall point value of the Dow remains completely flat.
Seamlessly integrating Alphabet's higher share price into the equation.
You got it. And the real-world consequence of that math is that every passive index fund, every institutional investor, and every retirement account that tracks the Dow mechanically has to go out and buy billions of dollars of Alphabet stock.
While simultaneously dumping Verizon.
Exactly. It forces capital out of legacy telecommunications and directly into cloud computing and AI.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because Alphabet's inclusion is incredibly symbolic of the software and AI boom. But Alphabet's software and AI models don't just live in the digital ether.
No, they require massive physical data centers.
Right. To see the raw, staggering numbers powering this supercycle, we have to look at the physical hardware companies building the brains of AI. And that brings us to the IG market preview for Micron's third quarter earnings, which report today.
Yeah, if you want to comprehend the sheer financial velocity of the AI boom, you really have to look at memory chips.
The hardware.
Right. Alphabet, Microsoft, Meta. They can design all the software they want, but those models require immense amounts of physical memory to process data. Micron is at the absolute center of this hardware bottleneck.
Let's look at the LSEG consensus projections here. And just to clarify for everyone, LSEG is the London Stock Exchange Group. They essentially aggregate the financial models of all the major Wall Street analysts to find the mathematical average of what the market expects.
All right.
So right now, the consensus expects Micron to report revenue of $35.59 billion for the quarter. That is a 283% increase year over year.
Just think about the scale of that for a physical manufacturing company. A hardware manufacturer nearly tripling its revenue in 12 months is practically unheard of.
And it gets wilder. Their gross margins are expected to hit a company record of 81.6%.
Wow.
And because of this insatiable demand, Micron's valuation has officially crossed the $1 trillion market capitalization mark.
Which is nuts, because historically, hardware manufacturing is a notoriously cyclical, margin-compressed business. You're dealing with supply chains, raw materials, massive factory overhead.
Right.
Hitting an 81.6% margin means you possess immense, unmitigated pricing power. And they have that power because of a specific technology called high bandwidth memory, or HBM.
Right, and Micron is already shipping volume production of HBM4, the next generation of this memory, which is specifically designed for NVIDIA's new Vera Rubin AI platform.
Yeah, these chips essentially feed data to the AI processor at lightning speeds, totally removing the computing bottleneck.
But the detail in this IG preview that absolutely stops you in your tracks is that Micron's CEO has openly admitted they are in a structural supply deficit. They can only fulfill 50% to two-thirds of their customers' demand in the medium term.
Which means they're essentially turning away a third of their potential revenue.
Because they literally cannot physically manufacture the chips fast enough.
And you can't just speed up production or build a new factory overnight. Semiconductor fabrication plants, or fabs, they take 3 to 4 years and upward of $20 billion to build.
20 billion.
Yeah. The machines used to etch these chips are the size of buses. They require perfect, microscopic clean rooms. Micron's new fabs won't be delivering meaningful output until 2028.
Wait, hold on. Consider the implications of that. You have Micron crossing a $1 trillion valuation and seeing 283% revenue growth, while openly admitting they can only meet half their customers' demand until new fabs open in 2028.
Yeah.
Isn't there a huge risk that this super cycle is actually a massive bottleneck that could just stall the whole AI industry?
It is the single biggest systemic risk to the tech rally right now.
Wow.
And the scarcity is actually bleeding over into their legacy products, too. Micron's chief business officer, Sumit Sadana, noted that even non-HBM DRAM margins are exceptionally robust because they're dedicating so much of their limited manufacturing capacity to these high-end AI chips.
Oh, I see. So the standard memory chips, the stuff that goes in regular laptops and servers, they're also facing massive supply crunches.
Exactly. Sometimes those non-HBM margins are even exceeding HBM margins. It creates a halo effect. The AI boom is eating up all the factory space, creating an artificial shortage for regular computer memory, making it far more expensive and profitable.
It all comes down to capacity.
But this brings us completely full circle. These tech giants like Alphabet are relying on hardware from companies like Micron to build their AI infrastructure, creating unprecedented financial velocity.
Right.
But this entire hardware ecosystem demands global stability to function. They need raw materials, they need rare earth metals, and they need stable shipping lanes to transport components from fabrication plants in Asia to data centers in the United States.
We have covered an incredible amount of ground today, so let's synthesize this deep dive.
Let's do it.
We started in the high-stakes, pressure cooker world of geopolitics, dissecting a highly precarious 60-day ceasefire between the U.S. and Iran. This Islamabad memorandum, born out of 14 months of volatile conflict and back-channel negotiations, manages to secure vital global shipping lanes like the Strait of Hormuz and brings independent UN nuclear inspectors back into Iran.
And the moment that immediate macroeconomic threat is paused, we see the domestic markets react.
Right.
The inclusion of Alphabet into the Dow Jones Industrial Average, displacing a legacy telecom company like Verizon, is the financial world cementing digital infrastructure and artificial intelligence as the load-bearing tillers of the modern economy.
But we also pulled back the curtain to see that this entire tech ecosystem is fundamentally constrained by physical hardware.
Right, exactly.
Companies like Micron are experiencing 283% revenue growth and commanding trillion-dollar valuations because they produce the essential memory chips powering AI. Yet they are facing a multi-year supply deficit that they cannot physically build their way out of until 2028.
It reveals the deep, deep interconnectivity of all these systems. A diplomatic signature in Tehran directly impacts the maritime shipping lanes in the Gulf.
which ensures the delivery of specialized components.
Right. That power the data centers running the AI models in California.
So what does this all mean for you? It proves that geopolitics and technology are no longer separate spheres that you can just analyze in isolation. They are gears in the exact same global machine.
Very true.
Your retirement investments tracking the Dow, the AI technology integrated into your daily workflow, and fragile global peace treaties in the Middle East are all fundamentally tied together. You cannot understand the trajectory of the stock market without understanding the geopolitical choke points that secure its physical supply chain.
The digital economy is still entirely reliant on the physical world.
Which brings me to a final thought for you to mull over as you go about your day. We know the future of a global economy relies entirely on AI, and we know that AI relies on a severely bottlenecked supply of memory chips, and those tech supply chains rely on global stability and open shipping lanes like the Strait of Hormuz. So, could the next great geopolitical conflict not be fought over oil, but over the raw materials, the fabrication plants, and the trade routes required to feed our artificial intelligence?
It's a sobering thought.
Keep questioning the connections around you, and thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.